Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
So, today we are going to jump into looking at your data that exists inside your organization. We touched on this some time ago in the context of reiterating
Yep.
that it's not always about bringing in or having your teams go out and collect new data. In a lot of cases, you have data in house, and challenges around managing and communicating that data is that either it's disorganized in different systems across different teams and individuals. The types of analyses that are being conducted might not be effective in the context of the data. And reporting out effectively can be impacted by biases
Yep.
or not having problem statements,
Yes.
not having something to trace that data back to in terms of, what's the right story to tell. You talked about storytelling
Yep.
too. What's the right story to tell about that data?
Yeah. So yes, all the above, right?
And when you think about the situation in some of the projects that we've worked on, what are some of the learnings or scenarios that you've seen that really stand out?
Okay, so the ones that really stand out is you have all this data and no one's actually doing any analysis. Where we worked on a project where we're out doing IDIs and usability sessions, all the research, and it turns out there's all this data that already existed. It's
Mhm.
already in house that answered a lot of the questions. And I think a pitfall, and we've talked about this, is sometimes you collect data for the sake of
Mhm.
collecting data and you just hone in on, I got to report this data. And so, every quarter you're just
Mhm.
doing reports. But you never actually, so second problem is not only do you have the data, you may be aware of it and be focused on reporting out and not on the analysis, the
Mhm.
actual analysis of the data. So you're spitting numbers out and not answering questions that map back to here's this problem statement. Does this
Mhm.
data, are we collecting the right data that aligns with our business goals? And again, to your point, those problem statements. So that's some of the big pitfalls I see
Yeah. Yeah.
frequent.
And you touched on a really key point around reporting back data. I can remember as an individual contributor years ago, having the task of reporting status across the team's activities and the insights that were gleaned from the work that we were doing as a team. And I was being told what to report. I didn't have a clear understanding of who was the audience, what were some of those business goals that weren't shared with me.
Mhm.
And so, in terms of alignment with the expectations from a reporting standpoint, I missed the mark in some places. And that came from either me not asking the right questions to my manager at the time or not having a seat at the table to really
Yeah.
understand, because my interpretation of the insights that can be gleaned from that data might be different than what my manager's interpretation is, or the two of
Right.
us together can have a conversation to see, is there something more valuable that we should be looking at or reporting. And so that can trip us up sometimes in terms of data management and reporting. And then also you think about if the role that you play around that data is very specific in terms of auditing, compliance, accreditation, or
Yes.
different regulations that kind of box you into doing certain things with the data. It can be difficult sometimes to step away and look beyond that data that you're always reporting to look at the bigger picture and the story that you have in that data that you're not even aware of because you're not paying attention to it.
Right. You're not doing the analysis. You're just doing the reporting of the data.
Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely. That is definitely, or you're doing an analysis, but you're doing it in a box, right? So you're not, I like you mentioned the collaboration piece. So different people have different takes. Even a lot of our data is relatively subjective, right? So you need those business goals, those problem statements in place. So you make sure you have the right data to validate or test that problem statement, or make sure you're addressing it. But two, well, we have our own biases when we're analyzing data. So, and and not even aware of it. So confirmation bias, look, this data is telling me we're doing a great job. So, recently there was a project where they had data with completion rates, on a specific type of test. And it looked good, right? So you have, let's just say 98% completion, pass rate. Well, what you didn't, so yes, we're doing a great job. We're done. When the truth, you had a confounding variable there, which was how many times did they have to take it? So are you doing a good job? Because, well, it turned out they're having to take it about 4 times on average to pass it. And it was a huge pain point for people. But if you just are looking at that data point, man, you look good, right? So
exactly.
So it's like, look, we're doing a good job in our whatever it may be, our workshops. So anyhow, things to look
Exactly.
for.
And that's a key point is, looking at the picture and thinking, oh, everything's great. And then you realize, well, it's not as great as I think, because if I looked at it in isolation, I have that one single
One
data
number.
point, but I have not looked at the bigger picture to say, okay, well, what are some of those other variables that could be impacting this number? Is it on first try? Is it taking multiple tries? Because that means you have another opportunity in front of you
Yes.
to explore why is, so you might think that you're delivering the right content or the right experience, and that it's effective because you got that 98% pass rate. But is it really as effective as it can be if you're finding out that it's taking 3 or 4 attempts? Well, no, that means that there's other work to do around the delivery, the programming, the content, whatever that is. And you miss that if you're only looking for that one data point.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
and that's really key. And I like the fact that you brought up the fact that there are biases that can come into play. And if you are not connecting with or talking to someone else, either within your organization or who's not as close to the data, most importantly, you may miss some opportunities there in terms of what insights might come out of that data.
Yes. And collaborate, right? Get those different perspectives. So
Yes,
you might own the analysis. It might be your in your wheelhouse, that you do this kind of thing. But it really
exactly.
should be a team effort in a way. So
Exactly.
support might come in and go, yeah, I hear you, what you're saying, but look at some of our top DOC when people call in. I think that might be influencing that completion rate or that pass
Correct.
rate, for instance, and
Correct.
that you won't get if you're not involving these different perspectives. Because again, confirmation bias can enter in, or just blind. You have blinders on.
Blind spots. Yeah.
Yeah, or blind spots is a better word for it, because you're not aware of these other things. And then that goes back to your in-house data. You should be synthesizing that to tell the
Mhm.
story. There's data everywhere, your sales
Mhm.
channel, your support channel, yet, your user research channel, product
Mhm.
management is out there, and hopefully recording the things they're hearing from customers. You need to
Mhm.
be pulling that all together. And I know we talk about it a lot, but pull it all together.
Mhm.
Or even platforms that allow you to integrate, these different data sources,
Exactly.
because it can be big, right? But the tools exist.
Exactly. And what are some of those? Do you have examples
I
of
knew
tools
you were
that you
going
would
to do
recommend? What did you
that.
say?
I knew you were going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of the platform tools, and you have caught me off guard. I was just looking
No,
at
let's think
the
about
other
it.
day, where you literally do have all of these, and it's a heavy lift,
Yeah,
when you're trying to integrate
it
all this
is. It
data, but they've got the tools in there to give you that
is.
single view and even to do the analysis, that
Mhm.
can be really complicated when you're trying to do it just kind of on your own. Hey, support, give me a spreadsheet of,
Mhm.
information you're getting, or sales channel, give me information, the data you're collecting over there, and
Mhm.
trying to do it all. So what is that?
I've seen people use tools like Confluence for that sort of thing, creating like a standing up a Confluence space. And I don't know if there's necessarily any specific tool that has to be the right answer, but I think the suggestion around making sure that you're putting all that data in one place and also unifying or looking for those consistent patterns that you can in terms of how you input that data, but also how you analyze that data are very important.
Right.
You also brought up another point I don't want to lose is over time, what we have learned is stepping into projects and learning about all the data that already exists within that
Yep.
organization can kind of catch us off guard because it then becomes a question of how do I deliver additional value if you already have all of this value.
Yep.
And over time, what we've recognized is it's really important to either on your own or with that second set of eyes, take a step back and look at what you already have in house.
First.
Go through, yes, first, go through that data. And we have now moved to making sure that engagements start with looking at that existing data because it allows you, where you don't have problem statements, it allows you to validate what are those problem statements that we should be focused on, or what are the ones that you've already answered in your existing data? And how do we now look at the secondary questions that need to be answered?
I was about to say that's one of the highest value pieces is if you look at that data, you can identify the
Mhm.
gaps. One, you can maybe start telling a more comprehensive story about what's
Mhm.
going on, but you can also identify the gaps because how many times have we started a project and they have their goal for us and what they want us to do, we grab their existing data and say, you have more answers than we're going to get in a month, but here's where the gap is.
Yeah.
So let us go, run down that rabbit hole. So
And that is I think the secret sauce
yes.
is opening up that data to an expert who is objective, who is seeing that data and that space for the first time because you
Hmm.
can guarantee they're not too close to it, and allowing them to explore patterns that exist, gaps that are present, where there might be some potential biases in the way in which that data
Yes.
is reported or managed, and allowing for that type of effort to take place first is really helpful in being able to understand, do we already have the answers we need? Do we need to
Hmm.
go get additional answers? And what are they?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I love it. So I think that that's really, kind of the takeaway is making sure that you have data that is managed effectively, and ensuring that you have a comprehensive view of all the data that exists in your organization.
Mhm.
When you think about the field of data science, what does that mean in terms of the data that you have? What type of skill set or expectation do you have for this data scientist? We didn't even touch on that. I
Yeah.
can remember years ago experiencing the hiring of a data scientist, and in working with that individual, they didn't even understand the value or necessity for a problem statement to understand how to manage that data, what
Yes.
data to look at, what analysis to perform. So when you think about the whole discipline of data science, what does that mean in your organization and what data do you have access to?
Right.
And then also you got to think about those biases and those blind spots. and make sure that you avoid them at all costs. And sometimes that takes a second set of eyes to do that.
Yep, absolutely. And just take the time to do it, doesn't have to be a year-long exercise, even if you have a ton of data. Go out there, use some of the tools, that you talked about. And I suddenly drew the blank on, I think it was Calendly, I can't remember. But anyway, get those tools to help you if you need it. Get the second set of eyes to help you. What was that, Kenya? I think you froze.
Joining us today, we had a really good conversation on what to do with that data. You have additional questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. Let me throw up the email address before I forget. And if you have future topics that you'd like to see as well, please don't hesitate to share them. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next time.